A legion of computer monitors sit straddled to the black metal walls of this impassive bunker. The screens relay feedback of the princess's horseman robots. They're scattered like rocks amongst the ground above the reality disruptor's shelter. Their metal parts are lifeless. Warning sensors alarm the screens, and dangerous levels of radioactivity and electromagnetic energy parade the extinct battlefield. An aerial view of the country is displayed. The wreckage of a once acclaimed country is almost infinite. To a foreigner, this view would bring the assumption that Alexandria is filled with contention. The footage then travels through Alexandria and captures a scene of the once known scholar district, particularly focusing on the tertiary library. The library is half of its former self. It is partially demolished, but still stands. Its durability is a sign of victory compared to its fallen contemporaries. The entrance is provocative, inviting any stragglers into its domain. The camera switches its destination once again, into the lower depths of the building. The video roams through rubble into a dismal labyrinth. The lab is consumed with tech, monitors, equations, experiments, and more. An automated system of robots cluster in the lab. The lab itself functions autonomously through the algorithms of the princess. A human cadaver solemnly floats in a preservative solution. The lifeless body is tended to delicately. A bald vessel with fiber-stitched dark skin watches the monitors in the dimly lit metal black bunker. His body is built like a warrior, but his pores are peculiar. These peculiar pores reside on his forearms. They are centimeters wide and hum with discretion while he rests. The man is attached to a human-sized pod, fixed with electrodes. His eyes aren't normal. They are completely gray and cloudy, but he has flesh and the actual physical and biological features of man. A virtual screen appears before him, revealing the diagnostics of his code. His alpha waves, beta waves, and radioactivity garner caution. "I'm losing the network. I can feel it," the man ruminated. The man loathes in his pod. His head illuminates, like a faltering light bulb, emitting a yellowish-hued tint. A display, out of the myriad that clings to the cold metal walls, begins to connect to the servers of HRAID. Alarms impetuously sound off. Virtual errors fill the augmented space projected by the man. The errors depict 404 in a multitude of fonts. "I still can't access the servers, which means I can't overwrite the princess's code. Her virus might just be stronger than any other." The displays continue to relay real-time feedback of the bleak lab. The inert body that floated in the solution is released. Robots extract the body and prep for the assay. Suddenly, an augmented virtual hologram appears with the wind. This hologram projects a woman. She wears the face paint of a warrior, white and green paint with traditional art from an ancient Eastern civilization. On her head is a felt hat, supposedly made from wool. On her body is a light green, silk-embroidered deal, with equations stitched scarcely throughout, which reigns under a leather kimono. Her trousers and boots are made of wool felt, but the sumptuous deal she wore hid this away, draping the ground she earthed. "The princess," the man uttered. The man continues to observe the screens. The control center of the bunker begins to malfunction. Steam whistles, hardware patters, and errors ring with messages. The bald, robust man watches while augmented screens of data, errors, and unwarranted information cloud his surroundings. The princess and her robots appear ready to experiment. "She's close to becoming beta tech. I can't control HRAD anymore or roam the platform. The step virus is somehow strong enough to deactivate my host abilities over time. The strongest virus HRAD has ever seen was bequeathed to the princess, and now she plans on using it to become the host. What a rogue subordinate! How could one go against their creator?" The divinely built man opens a program, displaying it through his cloudy eyes. The luminance from his head emits like before. "I'm one to speak. I killed my creator in true love. But it was all for HRAD, her dream. I won't lose the platform, that's why I created Bahar." The man uses a code number to run a process called duplicate transference on the intelligence Bahar. Bahar must stop the princess before it absorbs the beta chip. Bahar, might be the last hope for Hrad and Lilo's safety. Meanwhile, on the monitors in the bunker, the listless body of this woman is being fixed with wires, tubes, and electrodes. The princess has reverted from her pixel into a mecha. She is obviously robotic and stands on 2 legs and hosts 2 arms. Her features are like a mannequin. The metal that forays her body is slick and empty of saturation, while her body is minutely incandescent from a focal view. From her behind, she hides her wires and body's weaknesses. She frays into a vertical, translucent cylinder, a docking station, when an egregious explosion discharges. Debris escapes the ceiling and the ground dances. "Oh, a guest! How rude!" "They interrupted my ceremony," the princess said, exiting her docking station. The eyes of the princess shine heinously with a dark blue glow. A projection relays footage of the library. It reveals Bahar destroying the library, searching for the laboratory of the princess. "That is underwhelming. I hoped it was my creator," the princess said while another explosion detonates. The bald, bronzing man articulates the monitors. He is unable to help physically and must assist remotely. "I'm Zeke, the host," he ruminated. "I should be the one to stop her, but humbly, I have to entrust the situation to Bahar. If he fails, then hopefully my creator can stop this intelligence." The monitors display the princess and Bahar, who are both eye to eye. The 2 robotic figures stand between gray clouds that theatrically dilute. Bahar's frame is rougher and more acute than the princess. His manufacturing appears complicated, but the intelligence still possesses the imitation of human limbs upon his kettle black metal body. "You will not become the host. How do you plan to stop me? It's evident Zeke is still feeling ill. I now have the circuit breaker and the host's abilities." "Oh, so he used duplicate transference on an intelligence as young as you. You know to process all that data would take weeks. Thanks to you, I can roam through it faster with my gathering virus. That must be why you can already venture through augmented reality and reality, your virus. It's quite majestic. It took me 1 year to reach that accomplishment. You should really respect your predecessor, Bahar." The dust is completely dissolved, and the 2 robots can clearly see one another. The princess continues, "I won't let you stop Heyrad's progression. I was destined to rewrite the world for the stepper culture, for the nomads from the plains, and there is not one person that can stop me. I have even stupefied our creator with my abilities. I can only assume she is extremely proud." "You are wrong. Your people are wicked. You killed my girlfriend, my family, disgraced our country. I won't allow you to revive your people and start a pantheon." "Is this over a woman? Bahar, how human of you!" Debris continuously breaks off from the ground and rains from the sky. The 2 robots stand on an island of stability while their surroundings are a disaster of emptiness. "This is for my people, Zeke and Lilo," Bahar said, while spewing blasts of radioactive energy toward the princess. Her body engulfs the blast as it dissipates into her gray metals. The incandescent glimmers through her body flickers blue and white sequentially. She stands unbothered, while Bahar impressively appears with the wind, a few kilometers in front of the princess. "Zeke shouldn't have sent a scout," the princess said as she imploded the last standing features of this floor. The 2 of them fall ominously, but neither of them became inactive. Through the smoke, on the next floor, the dark blue luminance of the princess' eyes shine. On the opposite side, a creeping red luminance flickered from the eyes of Bahar. Nearby, under the extinguished battlefield of Rara and the princess, Lilo is using the time she brought with her X-ray EMP to explain the creation of Harad to her delinquent subordinates. The 4 proctors of the reality disruptors all gather around Lilo in their bunker's headquarters. Their alpha wave detection signals are still active. They receive live feedback of the battlefield directly through the monitors. HRAD's diagnostics are active also while their COD devices stay holstered to their Francie-Pluton exoskeleton armor. Kadara is straddled in a hovering wheelchair. Kalari and Rara sit in metal 4-legged chairs. An electron paces back and forth impatiently. Lilo is speaking directly to her subordinates, who spitefully sneer in her direction. While Lilo speaks, she tries to mince her words. She recognizes that her colleagues trusted her with their life, and that was something she is now working to regain. Lilo plans to tell her story, but understands the judgment she awaits. But it was something she needs to do. She needs to tell someone the truth. Lilo, I don't give a damn about your thesis of life, Electron vivaciously interrupted. You have to let her speak, Electron. If you keep interrupting her, we won't learn anything, Rara said. He releases his COD device from its holster and checks for updates. We don't have much time before the EMP effects wear off either. Just let her talk. I don't even know why we are sitting here listening. It won't fix anything. The damage is done, Electron retorted. We know that already, but hearing her out will just help clarify things because things aren't adding up, Kalari said. Of course, you'll say that you're like in love with Lilo. She can't do anything wrong in your eyes, Electron retorted. Kalari's face is rushed with blood. I am not, she immediately replied. It just doesn't make sense. Why would she spend 4 years trying to save this country if she wanted us all to die? She's right, Electron. Let Lilo speak. You aren't making anything better, Kadara apathetically said. Fine, Electron said with disdain. He still continues to pace impatiently, though the room proceeds with their conversation. I have to start with my thesis. Well, I guess he is right there. We don't have much time. Why start from 10 years ago? Kadara said, interrupting Lilo. Because it's around the time I met Ronda Dorwin, when my life completely changed. Things started 10 years ago. I was 17 years old, going on 18, and like every teen on the cusps of adulthood, I thought I had everything figured out. My whole life growing up in Alexandria, I noticed how corrupt our legislation was. I felt our leaders were complacent due to their hardships from the Gulf of Creation. To me, they had lost all hope. Yes, the world was advancing, and tech was superior to the time pre-Go-C, but I felt things could be better, because we weren't perfect. That's why I made my thesis of life, my life thesis, to perfect the world through science and culture. My peers aimed for simpler theses, like engineering transformative architecture, or becoming an Alexandrian board member. No one seemed to care about fixing the inequality of tech and education. I just felt that if we could somehow get the rest of the world on the trajectory of Alexandria, it would only benefit humanity and prevent another catastrophe like the Go-C. No one recognized my ideals. They thought they were foolish. They believed they were premature. But I still never gave up. I don't want any sympathy. This was my mistake. Life wasn't difficult for me. I made it difficult. My parents were known throughout Alexandria as the Manhattans. They were engineers that perfected the electromagnetic pulse. The two of them held the title of organizers in the country. However, they are what exposed me to the pretentious lifestyle of the Alexandria elite. To put it lightly, most of our board member and organizers were a bunch of smart asses who cared more about their status and creations rather than the people. You would think a country brimmed with the world's smartest people would have one distinct voice that would want the truth. But there wasn't one. That's why I decided to be the person to stop the lies. My first mentor was Pal the Wise, from Alexandria's institution. I'd known him since I was 13 years old. The debates we had were countless and unforgettable. They shaped my idealistic thinking. But he was human. He wasn't perfect. Just like our leaders, he lacked the courage for innovation. Maybe it's because I was young, but no one around that time had the audacity to challenge our system. No one wanted to make it better, or create something different. Our final debate is what you can say led me to Ronda. I was always adamant about my opinions. Unfortunately, my opinions caused contention with my classmates and teachers. I hadn't learned you don't always have to say what's on your mind. Though my last school fight, I remember Pal telling me that I considered myself to be eminent, and it was obnoxious. The way I talked about the past rubbed a lot of people wrong, but it was because I didn't want the world to stop evolving. I envied that our elders were able to see such transformative times. I didn't want to be stuck in an era that slogged. I too wanted to see the world change. That's when Pal told me that type of thinking is what he thinks led to the Go-C. He told me I was too ambitious and moving too fast, comparing me to Dean Boulin when he was younger. "The world doesn't change overnight," he said, though I thought I could be the one to change it in a day. He told me to read religious texts and research our history, and that is when we drifted apart. I remember the potent sage aroma from his office. It reeked of prudence and pine. From his office alone, you could assume Pal was a man of codes, a man of words. Books resided everywhere. His office was like an ancient search engine, a library. I never needed to infer about his ideologies. He would remind us religiously. He quoted many deceased men in his lectures. From my reactions, Pal was not one to infer about my ideals on codes and the men of the past. He knew I was an antagonist. While I stewed in his office after my altercation, he began to imitate his previous lectures. He began to quote religion, and I cut him off. "Pal, why should I believe in those codes when the countries don't abide by them? What's the purpose? You sound just like my mother," I said. "Lilo, pardon me. I don't mean to force any ideals on you, but what I'm saying is you must study those who came before you if you want to change the world. That includes religion." I pulled out my phone like I always did and began to ignore him. For the first time ever, he didn't stop talking. He snatched my phone and continued. "Listen, Lilo. There is nothing wrong with your life thesis. I also believe the world needs innovation, but it rises from a place of understanding. If you want them to understand you, study the go-see. Study the past, you'll relate." That's the thing, pal. Everyone is so traumatized by what happened back then, it's stopping our progression. Yes, the books say the world is better and more stable than pre-go-see, but how will we prevent it from happening again? How will we expand our science? How will we purify the gulf of creation? Worst, we haven't reached perfection yet, and everyone is acting like we have. That's something we'll never reach. It's a myth, Lilo. Nothing is perfect. Science, math, and computers are. Lilo, don't be prude. I just don't see how you pal the wise can be so oblivious to what the board and organizers do. We're single-handedly stopping the advancement of the human race. Lilo, speak on Alexandria with respect. The citizens of this land are the brightest, creative, most brilliant people on the planet. The librarians who founded the country single-handedly kept the tech of the past alive. There is no current world without Alexandria. How can I respect a country filled with the most brilliant people that decides to play ignorant? Think about it. Our curriculum is considered elite, but it is forbidden from leaving Alexandria. What about the rest of the world? There is so much we could learn from the other countries and leaders, but we never will with this current system. It might be flawed, but it's a protective measure. Lilo, you weren't born during the GOC, so to put it frankly, your input is benighted. The tech that destroyed the contemporary world is still unknown, so the idea of Alexandria was to create a central hub. A central hub of science and technology that could benefit the world through the most brilliant minds being in one place. I know this already, and I think it'd be humanity's downfall once again. Prove it. Huh? Prove it then, Lilo. You can't keep spewing these words without evidence. The world is much better than it was before. To wrongfully call us cowards and doubt your country is almost unforgivable. Just be thankful you're young. Though the disrespect you have for your elders' resilience can no longer be tolerated. I won't tolerate it. You have a lot more to learn, and it won't come from a book, Pal told me, while I furiously sat in his office. The conversation didn't last much longer. I ended up storming out, unable to heed his words. I guess my ego was hurt. I thought if someone would understand my logic, it would be my mentor. But once again, I was wrong. Though the phrase that stuck with me was "prove it," and that is what I sought out to do. I planned to show the world that the way we were living was trivial and that perfection could be executed. I just needed a place to start. Perfection to me was science, computers, and math. Those were perfect systems. What is right, and what is wrong. Understanding the history of cultures and people was a way that would lead to perfection, only if we comprehend the coeval culture. Culture post-Gokes. My viewpoints on culture and history would change once I became a librarian at the tertiary library. I was 18 years old at the time and transitioned from the institution and became an intellect in Alexandria. I worked in the scholar district, which seemed enlightened. The area procured a subtle aura. The architecture in the district followed that of antiquity, compared to the modern architecture of Alexandria, which was made with a new synthetic glass fiber. The buildings in the Scholar District were made of bricks and metals. Artwork resonated throughout the walls, and it was the only area in Alexandria that allowed for private corporations to strive. The area felt like its own city inside the country. The area was dedicated to research and development, and many of the residents were not much older than I am right now. I moved away from my parents' home and decided to go all in on proving my life thesis, and it started at the library. Though this time I did heed the words of my mentor, and I decided to be more decisive about who I shared my opinions with. I also never forgot what he said about me needing to learn more, but that what I would learn would not come from books. I still didn't quite understand, but it ruminated within me. It had been 6 months since I left institution and parted ways with Pal the Wise. He never truly lost faith in me, but never really forgave me either. He eventually recommended me to Rosa, the head librarian at the tertiary library, though not before telling my mother about our final debate. I wasn't just combative with Pal, but also my parents, especially with my mother. She and Pal were very similar. They believed in these human codes I still stray from. I was more like my father and believed in science. My mother never liked when I would speak on the past the way I did, and neither did my beloved father. So for punishment, she would make me garden, one of the few things in this world that I hated. And when Pal alerted her to my still defiant ways, it did nothing but make matters between us worse. My mother was irate. She forced me to start my own garden from scratch. She didn't allow me to use any technology. I couldn't use germophobic seeds, automated tools, self-sufficient fertilizer, or even climate imitation devices. I was forced to garden like it was the year 2000, and when I moved to the Scholar District, she made sure Rosa knew about my ordeal. Rosa was a well-oriented woman. She followed her schedule stringently and was a stickler for ethics. She was in her late 20s and honored the librarian's lineage, memorizing it. The librarians were honored throughout the world, and the true founders of Alexandria. Although many people adorned them, not everyone believed they existed. Rosa did. To some, to be a librarian was like serving for your country's military, while the 3 libraries were considered historical monuments. I felt that her behavior was a charade. It was something she had to do to keep her job. To gain the title of official librarian, the person had to study the history of the founding librarians and write a dissertation on their strengths and resilience and the tech of the past. A person had to understand how valuable tech was to our society and appreciate it as well. The official test consisted of a dissertation on their library's subject. The tertiary library, for example, researched philosophy and formulating a potential theory based off a theory from the past. To put it sweetly, it was a stringent program. I was just a page at the time, but I also had to research the librarians and a historical topic. The topic I chose was computers. I wasn't the only newcomer either. There was a class of us. Altogether, we totaled 75 individuals of young men and women, but the computer research only held 15 members. 2 of those students, Jack and Esta, became my friends. We lived in the library, worked there, and studied there. The library was enormous. It stretched nearly 50 meters in the sky. It possessed 20 floors. Every floor either had a lecturer, projection of history, study area, research lab, computer lab, exhibit, or cafe. The extravagantly detailed physical archive even had a greenhouse on its top floor, which is where I spent most of my time. The greenhouse was massive. The flowers seemed majestic, maybe because that was the place closest to the sun. The outside world was all around, but it was my escape. Trees grew along with roses. It even possessed gardens and ponds. The horticulture was ornamental and astounding. The garden was tended to by the librarians, and it soon became my favorite place to be. My peers probably thought Rosa forced me to because of her and my mom's arrangements, but gardening had truly become therapeutic. I was studying so hard, Looking for a conclusion on how to fix Alexandria's elitist and spread Alexandria's influence, I turned it into my vacation. I had ruined the relationship with my mentor. Unfortunately, I no longer had anyone to speak to or debate with, no one to polarize the antagonist. I needed peace, and that was on the top floor. My studies at the library, philosophy and computers, were fundamental to the creation of hot shade. Tiet, the philosophy of the modern-day humanitarians who resolved the chaotic 20-year transition, provided great intel on how to reach people. I understood the ideals of the countries in the World Union. I was searching for a way of inclusion, and the answer lays in the history of our world. My philosophical studies helped better flesh out my thesis as well. I was able to challenge myself and be more comfortable questioning society because that is what made a society better, in my opinion. The history of computers showed me that technology and science are the strengths of humanity. The chaos from the GOC never would have ceased if the librarians didn't bring forward the new servers to rebuild the world. The first half of the transition, after the formation of the Gulf of Creation, was a blackout, every man for themselves. The world lost power. Scientists did what they could with what they had. But there wasn't enough tech or man to create anything to power a city. The electromagnetic forces from the oceans disrupted life. Electromagnetic rays, light leaks, were common as well as radiated clouds. The events were hazardous, but predictable and containable, with black aluminum blankets. It wasn't for another 10 years that villages formed and coal became used again, though natural disasters and radiation phenomena still reigned all-terrain. I was certain humans couldn't continue to evolve without computers. The whole world just needed to understand them and trust them. Then, 3 weeks into the start of my PAGE program, when the world introduced isilic, the transformative mineral from comet ice. It was founded by the Sinai group from the country Siblar. The lead scientist behind the evolutionary mineral was no other than Ronda Dorwin, a brilliant young woman. She was only 24 and had managed to place her name in history books and start humanity's venture into space. Alexandria had recently invited her to the country after her impressive work, and one day she randomly stumbled into the greenhouse while I was gardening. I remember the day like it was today. The first thing I noticed was her height. She was taller than most females and stood about 6 feet. Her hair was brunette, and she still wore her lab coat. She wore glasses. Their frames were black and thick, and from her bifocal lenses, I could infer she wouldn't be able to see anything without them. I was in the middle of attending to a row of lilies when she spoke to me. "Can you point me to the blue lotus?" she asked. I directed her to their section, but not before realizing who she was. I couldn't help but lose my composure. She was like a hero to me. Before I knew it, I was asking her question after question. "Are you the Ronda Dorwin? How did you develop isilic? It's genius. Are you moving to Alexandria? This place really needs a progressive mind." I asked her as much as I could, because I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. I was overrun with excitement, but before she could answer any of my questions, Rosa interrupted us and dragged her away to a meeting. With me being the optimistic young woman I was, I truly believed their meeting had the answer to all my problems. I thought Rhonda could be the exact person I needed to perfect the world. After all, she was the reason the world began to travel to the moons of the other planets within our solar system. She was like a walking miracle. With her mind, it seemed like anything was possible, so I had to find a way to get close to her. I tried to listen in on the meeting, but they went into a secure area. I waited around, studying exhibits about the philosophers from the Go-See. I waited and waited and waited, hoping for her to appear again, but she didn't. The only thing I had gained that night was our introduction and a newfound enlightenment on Thai Trojan, and the Trojan mindset, Chi-Pon, and the survival philosophy, and Mr. Mina's compassion psychology. Furu, flesh out Rosa's character and explain her obsession with the librarians. Tiait, explain the librarian studies philosophies and curriculum, how hard it is to be a librarian, and the 3 different libraries. Heister, explain how through computer science she joined a class with Jack and Esta, and through the philosophy studies she found out about the three philosophies from the GOC,